Heat surrounded him from every direction. Smoke stung his eyes. He grabbed another fallen timber lying nearby. Using all his strength, he shoved it against the burning beam blocking the captain's path. The wood rolled just enough. An opening appeared. Captain Rowe looked at him. For the briefest moment, neither man spoke. Then the captain smiled. "Now run." They sprinted together. Both leaped over the railing at exactly the same instant. The longboat rocked violently as they landed inside. Oliver immediately cut the final rope. The rescue boat drifted free. They had escaped. For perhaps 3 seconds, then, the towering main mast of the Midnight Star finally surrendered. With a deafening roar, hundreds of feet of burning timber collapsed across the deck. A fountain of sparks exploded into the sky. Flames raced from bow to stern. The abandoned ship became a floating inferno. The men in the longboat rowed silently away. No one celebrated. No one spoke. They simply watched. The Midnight Star burned against the darkening evening sky like a giant torch upon the sea. Lucas held the wooden memory box tightly against his chest. Inside were the watch, the photograph, the letter, the last remaining pieces of one captain's promise. Captain Rowe looked back only once. "We couldn't save the ship." Thomas nodded quietly. "But we saved her story." Lucas continued watching as the flames reflected across the calm ocean. Hours earlier, the vessel had been a mystery. Now, it had become a legend. One that would never again disappear beneath the waves, without someone remembering the courage of the people who had sailed aboard her. Far above, the setting sun finally broke through the clouds. Golden light mixed with the orange flames, creating one unforgettable image upon the endless sea. Lucas knew he would carry that sight with him for the rest of his life. The rescue boat rose and fell gently on the long ocean swells. Behind them, the flames consuming the Midnight Star continued climbing higher into the evening sky. No one reached for an oar. No one spoke. Every man remained captivated by the unforgettable sight. The abandoned vessel drifted silently, wrapped in fire from bow to stern. Its shattered mast collapsed one final time with a thunderous crash. A shower of glowing embers spiraled upward like thousands of tiny stars escaping into the night. Lucas held the weathered wooden box across his knees. The brass watch rested safely inside. Beside it lay the faded photograph and Captain Samuel's final letter. 3 ordinary objects. Yet together they carried an entire lifetime. Captain Rowe finally broke the silence. "We row home." The men dipped their oars into the water. Each stroke echoed softly across the calm sea. It felt strange. Only an hour earlier they had been surrounded by mystery, fear, and fire. Now, only the sound of splashing oars remained. As they drew closer to the Silver Crest, cheers erupted from the deck. Crew members lined the railings. Several waved their hats in relief. One sailor shouted, "The captain's back." Another laughed loudly. "I told you they'd return." Ropes were lowered. The longboat was secured alongside the ship. Lucas climbed aboard with tired arms and aching legs. The familiar wooden deck suddenly felt different beneath his feet, safer, warmer. Almost like home. Noah hurried toward him. "We thought we'd lost you." Lucas smiled weakly. "So did I." No one noticed the soot covering Lucas's face. "You look terrible." Lucas laughed for the first time all day. "I feel even worse." Nearby, Daniel Mercer stood quietly at the rail, staring at the burning silhouette of the Midnight Star growing smaller in the distance. Captain Rowe approached him. What will you do now? Daniel watched the horizon for several long seconds. I don't know. I've spent so many days surviving. I forgot how to start living again. Captain Rowe rested a hand on his shoulder. Then start small. Daniel looked at him. Eat, sleep. Watch tomorrow's sunrise. The rest can wait. Daniel nodded slowly. For the first time since they had met him, his eyes held something besides fear. They held possibility. That evening, after everyone had eaten, Captain Rowe gathered the crew beneath the main mast. The sea had become perfectly calm again. Above them, countless stars filled the sky. The captain placed the old wooden box on a barrel where everyone could see it. You all know what happened today. The crew fell silent. We found no treasure, no gold, no jewels. He gently lifted the faded photograph. But we found something far more valuable. He showed the smiling father and daughter to the crew. A reminder. Every ship carries cargo, but every person carries a story. He unfolded Captain Samuel's letter. I want every sailor aboard the Silver Crest to hear these words. The captain slowly read the letter aloud. No one interrupted. When he finished, even the oldest sailors remained silent. Several quietly removed their hats. Thomas looked toward the sea. I've crossed this ocean for nearly 30 years. I've seen storms. I've seen battles. I've buried friends. But I don't think I've ever heard words stronger than those. Oliver nodded. Neither have I. Lucas looked around at the faces illuminated by lantern light. Each sailor seemed lost in thought. Perhaps each remembered someone waiting at home, a wife, a father, a child. A promise. Captain Rowe carefully placed the letter back into the box. Tomorrow, we continue our voyage. But we do so carrying more than supplies. We carry their memory. The crew answered together. Aye, Captain. Later that night, Lucas sat alone near the stern with his leather journal. For a long time, he couldn't think of what to write. Every lesson he had learned since leaving Ashbrook suddenly felt too small for everything that had happened aboard the ghost ship. Finally, he dipped his pen into the ink. Slowly, carefully, he wrote. The sea tests every sailor differently. Some are tested by storms. Some by loneliness. Some by impossible choices. But in the end, a person's true direction is not decided by the wind. It is decided by the heart that guides the hands upon the wheel. Lucas closed the journal. A gentle breeze crossed the deck. Far away on the horizon, the last faint glow from the burning midnight star disappeared forever beneath the darkness. He thought the story had ended. He was wrong. High above in the lookout basket, a sailor suddenly called down, "Captain." Everyone looked up. What is it? The lookout stared toward the eastern horizon through his brass telescope. For several moments, he said nothing. Then his voice carried across the quiet sea. I can see land. The crew smiled. After days surrounded by nothing but endless water, those words felt like music. But the lookout didn't sound excited. He sounded confused. Captain Rowe accepted the telescope. He looked for a long time. Longer than anyone expected. Thomas noticed the change in the captain's expression. What do you see? Captain Rowe lowered the telescope very slowly. I don't know. Lucas frowned. An island, yes. The captain hesitated. But according to every chart aboard this ship, there shouldn't be one there. A cool breeze swept across the silent deck. Lucas slowly looked toward the dark horizon. somewhere beyond the moonlit waves. An island had appeared where no island was supposed to exist, and hidden safely inside the wooden memory box rested an ancient globe whose secret route ended at exactly such a place. Without realizing it, the crew of the Silver Crest had stopped following their planned voyage. They had begun following someone else's unfinished journey. Captain Rowe stood motionless, the brass telescope still resting in his hands. No one interrupted him. The silence itself was enough to tell the crew that something unusual lay ahead. Finally, Thomas spoke. "Captain." Rowe lowered the telescope without taking his eyes off the distant horizon. "Change course." Thomas blinked. "Toward the island." The captain nodded once, slowly. No unnecessary risks. Within moments, the helmsman adjusted the great wheel. The Silver Crest gradually turned eastward. The mysterious island grew larger with every passing mile. At first it appeared to be nothing more than a dark outline. Then details slowly emerged. Towering cliffs rose directly from the sea. Ancient pine forests covered the upper slopes. Waterfalls spilled from impossible heights, disappearing into clouds of mist before reaching the ocean below. The island seemed untouched, untamed, as though no human hand had disturbed it for centuries. Lucas stood beside Oliver. "It's beautiful." Oliver never looked away from the shoreline. "So was the storm." Lucas smiled. "You always have a way of ruining beautiful moments." Oliver laughed quietly. "No. I've simply learned not to trust first impressions." Captain Rowe unfolded one of the Silver Crest's official navigation charts across a large wooden table. Several officers gathered around. Lucas watched from nearby. The captain traced their current position with one finger. Then he pointed toward the empty section of ocean directly ahead. "There should be open water here." Thomas frowned. Could the charts be wrong? Captain Rowe shook his head. These charts were updated less than 5 years ago. Oliver looked toward the island again. "So either the chart is wrong, or something impossible is happening." No one liked either answer. As the ship continued forward, another strange detail became impossible to ignore. The sea around the island was unnaturally calm. Outside, rolling waves continued moving across the open ocean. Inside, an invisible boundary surrounding the island. The water became perfectly smooth, almost like polished glass. The difference was so sharp that it looked as though someone had drawn a line across the sea. Lucas leaned over the railing. "I've never seen anything like that." Neither had Captain Rowe. Thomas lowered a weighted measuring line into the water. Normally, the rope drifted with the current. This time, it hung perfectly straight. Not even the slightest movement. Oliver stared at the motionless line. "It's like the sea has stopped breathing." Daniel Mercer stepped quietly onto the deck. His eyes widened the moment he saw the island. "No." Captain Rowe turned immediately. "You recognize it?" Daniel slowly backed away. "No. But I've heard stories." The entire crew became silent. Daniel pointed toward the cliffs. "When I was a cabin boy, old sailors used to whisper about an island that only appeared to ships carrying unfinished promises." Several sailors exchanged uneasy glances. Thomas folded his arms. "Superstitions." Daniel nodded. "That's what I thought. Until today." Captain Rowe remained thoughtful. Stories often grow from real events. But stories also grow larger each time they're told. He refused to accept the legend without evidence. Yet he refused to dismiss it completely. Lucas admired that about him. The captain never allowed fear or pride to make decisions for him. An hour later, the ship entered the calm waters surrounding the island. Something remarkable happened. The wind disappeared instantly. The sails relaxed. The creaking of the ship stopped. Even the gulls circling overhead became strangely quiet. It was as if the entire world had lowered its voice. Then, a bell rang, once deep, clear. The sound drifted across the still water. Every sailor looked toward the island. Another bell followed. Then another, slow, steady. Lucas searched the cliffs through narrowed eyes. "I don't see a church." Thomas shook his head. "Neither do I." Captain Rowe raised the telescope once more. He scanned the shoreline. Nothing. Dense forest. Rocky beaches. Steep cliffs. No buildings. No lighthouse. No harbor. Yet the bell continued ringing. Lucas counted softly. 1, 2, 3. Exactly 12 chimes. Then complete silence returned. Oliver looked toward Daniel. "You've heard that story too." Daniel nodded. "The bell that has no tower." Lucas frowned. "What does it mean?" Daniel answered honestly. "I never believed enough to ask." Captain Rowe closed the telescope. "We deal with facts. The facts are simple. An island exists. A bell is ringing. And no visible source has been found." Thomas smiled faintly. "When you say it like that, it somehow sounds even stranger." Laughter quietly spread through the crew. The tension eased for a moment. Then the lookout shouted again. "Movement!" Everyone looked toward the western cliffs. Far above the shoreline, a flock of enormous white birds suddenly burst from the forest. Hundreds of them. Perhaps thousands. They circled together in perfect silence. Not a single cry echoed across the sky. Lucas watched in amazement. "I've never seen birds fly without making a sound." Oliver's expression became serious. "They're not flying away." Lucas followed their movement. He was right. The birds weren't escaping the island. They were circling one specific point near the highest cliff, again and again, as though guarding something hidden beneath them. Captain Rowe slowly smiled. "There." Thomas nodded. "You think that's where we should begin?" The captain folded the telescope. "If nature keeps pointing toward one place, I've learned it's usually wise to pay attention." The silver crest continued gliding silently toward the mysterious shoreline. No crashing waves greeted them. No welcoming harbor appeared. Only towering cliffs, ancient forests, and countless white birds circling endlessly above a place that seemed determined to remain hidden from the rest of the world. Lucas rested one hand on the weathered wooden memory box beside him. Inside lay Captain Samuel's letter. Inside the captain's cabin rested the ancient journal. And somewhere ahead, perhaps, lay the final chapter of a voyage that had begun decades before Lucas was ever born. The anchor dropped with a deep splash. Heavy chains rattled through the hawse pipe before finally falling silent. For the first time in days, the Silver Crest stood completely still. Not because the wind had failed, but because every soul aboard the ship wanted a moment to simply look. The island towered above them. Its cliffs rose almost straight from the sea, their dark stones streaked with silver where countless waterfalls had carved paths over thousands of years. Ancient trees clung to impossible ledges. Mist drifted between their branches like slow-moving ghosts. No houses, no docks, no smoke. No signs that anyone had ever lived there. Yet Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that countless eyes were watching from somewhere inside the forest. Captain Rowe lowered the telescope. "We don't all go." Thomas nodded immediately. "A small landing party. Less risk." The captain looked around the gathered crew. "I need volunteers." Before anyone else could speak, Lucas stepped forward. "I'll go." Oliver joined him. "So will I." Thomas smiled. "I expected nothing less." Captain Rowe selected 6 people altogether: Lucas, Thomas, Oliver, Daniel, Elias, and himself. The rest of the crew would remain aboard the Silver Crest. "If we don't return before sunset," Captain Rowe said calmly, "you leave." One sailor immediately objected. "Captain, we can't just abandon you." "You won't be abandoning us. You'll be protecting everyone else." Nobody argued after that. They knew the captain's decisions were never made lightly. Within minutes, the longboat slipped silently across the perfectly calm water. No wave struck its sides. No current pulled against the oars. Even the splashing sounded strangely muted. Lucas dipped one hand into the sea. He immediately pulled it back. "It's warm." Thomas looked surprised. "Warmer than the air." Daniel stared into the crystal-clear water. "You can see the bottom." Lucas looked over the side. The ocean floor stretched nearly 50 feet below them. Every stone appeared perfectly sharp. Schools of silver fish drifted lazily through waving forests of green sea grass. Then, Lucas noticed something impossible. There were no shadows. The fish swam beneath bright sunlight. The boat floated directly overhead. Yet nothing beneath the water cast a shadow. He rubbed his eyes. Still nothing. Oliver quietly leaned closer. "You see it too?" Lucas nodded. "I thought it was my imagination." Captain Rowe looked down for himself. His expression remained thoughtful. "Observe. Don't assume." Another lesson. Another reminder. The closer they approached the shore, the clearer the island became. The beach consisted of smooth white stones rather than sand. Crystal-clear streams flowed from the cliffs into the sea. Wildflowers covered every open patch of land. Butterflies floated through the air. The place felt untouched, perfect almost. Too perfect. The longboat gently scraped against the shore. No one moved immediately. Captain Rowe stepped out first. His boots landed on the white stones with a soft crunch. He looked around carefully. Nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No campfires. No signs of recent visitors. Lucas followed. The air smelled unlike anywhere he had ever been. Fresh pine. Wildflowers, rain. And something else. A faint sweetness he couldn't identify. Daniel closed his eyes. "I've dreamed about this place." Lucas looked at him. "You've been here before." Daniel slowly shook his head. "No. But somehow, it feels familiar." Captain Rowe crouched near the shoreline. He examined the stones. Then one small detail caught his attention. Footprints. Everyone hurried over. There they were. Bare footprints. Perfectly preserved in the damp stones. Small. Far too small for an adult. Lucas frowned. A child. Thomas examined them carefully. Maybe. Oliver pointed farther ahead. They continue into the forest. The tiny footprints wandered calmly between the trees. Not running. Not wandering. Walking with purpose. Daniel whispered, "There are no children here." Lucas looked back toward the empty beach. Then whose footprints are these? Nobody answered. Captain Rowe stood. We follow them. But carefully. The forest welcomed them with complete silence. Not a single bird sang. No insects buzzed. Even the waterfalls seemed quieter beneath the enormous trees. Sunlight filtered through ancient branches high overhead, creating moving patterns across the moss-covered ground. The footprints continued, always the same distance apart, always heading deeper. Lucas noticed another strange detail. The forest floor should have been covered with fallen leaves. Instead, it looked freshly swept, as though someone cared for the path every single day. Yet there was no one. Half an hour passed. Then the trees suddenly opened. Everyone stopped. Before them stood an enormous circular valley, hidden within the heart of the island. Lucas forgot to breathe. Hundreds of stone pillars rose from the green meadow below. Some leaned at impossible angles. Others stood perfectly upright despite their immense age. In the exact center, a colossal tree reached toward the sky. Its trunk was wider than an entire house. Its branches stretched across nearly the whole valley. Golden leaves shimmered gently in the sunlight, despite the complete absence of wind. The tree looked ancient beyond imagination. Its roots curled around weathered stone ruins, almost completely swallowed by nature. Thomas stared in disbelief. I've sailed for 30 years, and I've never seen anything remotely like this. Oliver pointed upward. The birds. Thousands of white birds circled silently above the great tree. Not randomly, together. Like guardians. Captain Rowe slowly removed his hat. No one asked why. It simply felt like the right thing to do. Lucas looked down. The tiny footprints ended at the base of the enormous tree. They didn't continue. They simply stopped, as though the child who had made them had vanished into thin air. A cool breeze finally stirred the golden leaves overhead. For the very first time, the island made a sound. Not a roar, not a whisper. A deep, resonant hum flowed through the valley, vibrating gently beneath their feet. Lucas looked at Captain Rowe. The captain wasn't watching the tree. He was staring at the ancient ruins wrapped around its roots, slowly. Very slowly. One massive stone doorway, hidden beneath twisting vines, began to open on its own. No one touched it. No visible mechanism moved. Yet the ancient entrance continued opening inch by inch, revealing only darkness beyond. And from somewhere inside that forgotten place, a warm golden light slowly began to glow. Captain Rowe took the first step. No one followed immediately. Not because they were afraid. Because every instinct told them they were crossing a boundary few people had ever crossed before. The ancient doorway continued opening without a single sound. Massive slabs of weathered stone slid apart with impossible precision. No gears. No chains. No visible mechanism. Only the slow movement of stone that should not have been able to move at all. Warm golden light poured through the widening entrance. Unlike sunlight, it carried no harsh glare. Instead, it illuminated the surrounding ruins with a soft glow that made every carved symbol appear almost alive. Lucas walked closer. The carvings covered every inch of the doorway: ships, stars, waves, compasses, and people standing beneath enormous trees with their hands raised toward the sky. Thomas gently brushed moss away from one section. These aren't decorations. Lucas leaned beside him. What are they? Captain Rowe studied the symbols carefully. A story. Someone wanted this place to be remembered. Oliver pointed toward several strange markings near the bottom of the doorway. These aren't letters I've ever seen. Neither have I, Captain Rowe admitted. Daniel stared at one particular carving. His breathing suddenly became uneven. I've seen this symbol before. Everyone turned toward him. Where? Daniel closed his eyes, trying to remember. Years ago. On the captain's desk, aboard the Midnight Star. It was carved into the corner of a wooden box. Captain Rowe slowly looked toward Lucas. The memory box. Lucas immediately untied the leather strap securing the weathered wooden box. He carefully opened the lid. Inside lay the brass pocket watch. The faded photograph. Captain Samuel's letter. Captain Rowe gently lifted the pocket watch. Turn it over. Lucas carefully flipped it into his hand. There it was. A tiny engraved symbol. Exactly the same one carved into the ancient doorway. No one spoke. Thomas quietly whispered, Captain Samuel knew about this island. Captain Rowe nodded. I think he did more than know. I think he was trying to reach it. Lucas stared at the watch. Then why didn't he tell anyone? Captain Rowe looked toward the ruins. Perhaps he was protecting it. The captain slowly stepped through the doorway. The others followed. The chamber beyond was enormous. Far larger than anyone expected. The ceiling disappeared high above into darkness. Hundreds of crystal formations grew naturally from the stone walls. Each crystal glowed with a faint golden light. The entire cavern seemed illuminated from within. A narrow stone path stretched through the center. On both sides flowed perfectly clear water. Lucas knelt beside one of the pools. The water reflected his face, then the reflection smiled. Lucas jumped backward. The smile vanished instantly. Thomas hurried over. What happened? Lucas stared into the water again. Nothing. Only his own reflection. Oliver looked into the same pool. Just water. Lucas rubbed his eyes. Maybe exhaustion was beginning to affect him. Captain Rowe calmly spoke without turning around. Remember the journal. Fear enters the mind before reason has a chance to speak. Lucas nodded. He took one deep breath. Then continued walking. The stone pathway eventually opened into an immense circular hall. Every member of the group stopped at exactly the same moment. Dozens of ships filled the chamber. Not full-sized vessels, models. Hundreds of them. Each one carved with extraordinary detail. Merchant ships, fishing boats, exploration vessels, warships. Some looked ancient. Others appeared surprisingly modern. Every model rested inside its own stone alcove. Beneath each one stood a polished bronze plaque. Captain Rowe approached the nearest display. He read quietly. Voyage completed. Thomas walked toward another. Returned safely. Oliver examined a third. Crew rescued. Lucas continued farther into the hall. Each model represented a different ship. Each plaque described only one thing. Not how wealthy the voyage had been. Not how famous. Only whether those aboard had found their way home. Then Lucas froze. Near the far end of the chamber stood another model. Larger than the others. Covered beneath a thin layer of dust. Its plaque had never been polished. Lucas slowly brushed the dust away. The engraved words appeared. Midnight Star. His heartbeat quickened. Captain Rowe immediately joined him. The beautifully carved model looked exactly like the ship they had just escaped. One mast broken. The same elegant bow. The same distinctive stern. Even the tiny lifeboats matched perfectly. Beneath it, another inscription, Voyage. Unfinished. Silence filled the hall. Daniel lowered his head. Captain Samuel never failed. Captain Rowe looked thoughtfully at the model. No. He simply never reached the end. Lucas noticed something else. Beside the Midnight Star sat one final empty stone pedestal. Nothing rested upon it. Only a polished bronze plate, no ship, no name. Just two engraved words. Awaiting arrival. Thomas frowned. Arrival of what? No one answered. Because at that exact moment, a low mechanical sound echoed through the chamber. Click. Every crystal surrounding the room brightened. Click. Another light awakened. Then another. Then dozens more. Golden light flowed through hidden channels beneath the stone floor like glowing rivers. The illumination slowly spread toward the empty pedestal. Lucas watched in amazement. The entire chamber had come alive. Captain Rowe looked around very slowly. This place was never abandoned. It was waiting. The glowing pathways finally reached the empty pedestal. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then the bronze plate began changing. Letters slowly appeared, as though being written by an invisible hand. Lucas stepped closer. The new words emerged one by one. Silver Crest. Every member of the crew stood frozen. No one needed to ask the question. The island already knew they had arrived. Captain Rowe stared at the glowing pedestal without speaking. The words Silver Crest continued shining across the polished bronze. Not carved, not painted. They seemed to exist beneath the surface itself. Lucas slowly reached toward the inscription. Just before his fingertips touched the metal, the light disappeared. The chamber fell silent once again. Nothing moved. Nothing glowed. It was almost as if the island had finished acknowledging their arrival. Thomas broke the silence. I don't think this place is magical. Oliver looked around. Then what is it? Captain Rowe smiled thoughtfully. Perhaps we simply don't understand the technology. Lucas looked up. Technology. These ruins are older than any city I've ever seen. The captain nodded. Age does not always determine knowledge. History has forgotten many things. Daniel slowly walked along the circle of ship models. His fingers lightly brushed the polished wood of each vessel. Every one of these ships reached this island. Captain Rowe answered quietly. Or at least, the people aboard them did. Lucas noticed something unusual near the center of the hall. A circular stone platform rose only a few inches above the floor. Unlike everything else in the chamber, it contained no carvings. No symbols, nothing. Just smooth black stone. Almost perfectly reflective. Oliver stepped closer. It looks like glass. Thomas crouched beside it. Stone. Definitely stone. Captain Rowe carefully approached the platform. The moment his boot touched its surface, a deep vibration echoed through the chamber. The crystal formation surrounding the room suddenly pulsed with golden light. Once, twice, 3 times. Lucas instinctively stepped backward. Thin lines of light spread across the black platform beneath the captain's feet. They expanded outward in perfect circles. The glowing rings continued growing until they reached every corner of the chamber. Then, the air itself began to shimmer. At first, Lucas thought it was heat. But the cavern wasn't warm. The shimmering slowly gathered above the platform. Tiny particles of light floated together. Thousands, then millions. Gradually, a human figure appeared. Not solid, made entirely of golden light. The crew stood frozen. The figure looked like an elderly sailor wearing clothes from another century. His face carried deep wrinkles. His long white beard rested against his chest. Yet his eyes appeared calm, kind, wise. The glowing man looked at each visitor one by one. Finally, his gaze settled upon Captain Rowe. "Welcome." His voice echoed gently throughout the enormous chamber. It sounded neither loud nor quiet, simply present. Lucas felt every hair on his arm stand upright. Thomas whispered, "Is he alive?" The glowing figure smiled. In one sense, no. In another, perhaps. Captain Rowe remained remarkably calm. "Who are you?" The figure bowed his head slightly. "My name has been forgotten. That no longer matters. I was once the keeper of voyages." Lucas exchanged a quick glance with Oliver. The keeper of voyages. The title somehow felt older than history itself. Captain Rowe spoke carefully. "What is this place?" The glowing man slowly looked around the chamber. "This is where journeys are remembered. Not because they reached their destination, but because they changed the people who walked them." Lucas frowned. "So every ship here represents a lesson." The keeper smiled warmly. "Exactly. People believe the purpose of a voyage is to arrive somewhere. They are mistaken. A voyage exists to transform the traveler." Daniel quietly stepped forward. "What happened to Captain Samuel?" The glowing figure became silent. For several long moments, only the gentle hum of the crystals filled the chamber. Finally he answered. "He chose others before himself. His voyage remained unfinished. But his purpose was fulfilled." Daniel slowly lowered his head. A single tear rolled down his face. Captain Rowe looked toward the empty pedestal. Why did it show the silver crest? The keeper turned toward the glowing pedestal. "Because every ship that reaches this island faces the same question." Lucas waited. The old sailor looked directly into his eyes. "Not every voyage deserves to continue." The room became very still. Captain Rowe folded his arms. "Explain." The keeper raised one glowing hand. Immediately, the black platform beneath them transformed. The polished surface became transparent. Instead of stone, they looked down upon the entire ocean. Clouds drifted below their feet. Ships sailed across miniature seas. Storms formed, disappeared. Continents slowly shifted. The world itself seemed alive beneath the chamber. Lucas forgot how to breathe. It was as though they were standing above the entire earth. Golden lines began appearing across the oceans. Hundreds of routes. Thousands. Each represented a different voyage. Some ended peacefully at distant harbors. Others vanished in storms. A few continued beyond the edge of the visible world. Then one particular line brightened. Silver Crest. The glowing route stretched from Ashbrook Harbor, across the storm, past the Midnight Star, ending exactly where they now stood. The line stopped, waiting. The keeper spoke softly. "Every journey eventually reaches a place where no map can guide it further. Only character can." Captain Rowe watched the glowing path. "And what happens now?" The old sailor smiled. "Now, your choices will determine whether this voyage becomes another forgotten crossing, or a story remembered for generations." Before anyone could ask another question, A deafening roar echoed from somewhere outside the mountain. The entire chamber trembled violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Several crystal formations flickered. Thomas looked toward the entrance. That wasn't thunder. Oliver's expression darkened. No. It came from the sea. The keeper slowly closed his eyes. They have arrived. Captain Rowe immediately turned. Who? The glowing figure opened his eyes one final time. For the first time, there was unmistakable concern upon his ancient face. Those who have searched for this island far longer than you have. The chamber shook again. Much harder this time. Somewhere beyond the mountain, cannons thundered across the sea. The peaceful island had just become a battlefield. Clapperboard image suggestion. The Keeper of Voyages, a spectacular cinematic scene inside the immense crystal chamber beneath the ancient island. At the center, a luminous elderly sailor made entirely of golden light stands upon a glowing black stone platform, displaying a holographic map of the entire world beneath transparent glass-like flooring. Around him stand Lucas Bennett, Captain Henry Rowe, Thomas Briggs, Oliver, Daniel Mercer, and Elias, all illuminated by thousands of radiant crystal formations embedded in the cavern walls. Golden sea routes stretch across the holographic oceans beneath their feet, while distant shockwaves ripple through the chamber from cannon fire outside. The atmosphere blends ancient mystery with breathtaking cinematic grandeur, creating a scene worthy of a Hollywood fantasy adventure masterpiece. Ultra-realistic, epic scale, dramatic volumetric lighting, breathtaking composition. 16:9. Thank you for listening to English Audio Stories. If you enjoyed this adventure, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next English story. Listening to English every day is one of the best ways to improve your vocabulary, pronunciation, and fluency naturally. Even just a few minutes each day can make a big difference. Tell us in the comments, what was your favorite moment in Lucas Bennett's journey, and what do you think awaits him on the mysterious island? We love reading your thoughts, and your ideas might even inspire future stories. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, keep dreaming, and remember, every great adventure begins with a single story. See you in the next episode of English Audio Stories.